Hello everyone, and welcome back to Rudy's 1/6 World for another new figure showcase, where we'll do a quick review and posing session with the newest addition to the collection. And today, we are going to be looking at the Sorcerer Supreme from Toys Battalion. Now, this is a third-party figure, but I think it's clear that it's meant to be a representation of Wong as he appeared in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And I think that's partly dictated by the accessories as well as his facial appearance with the facial hairstyle he has. So, I'll start by saying I actually really did enjoy the Doctor Strange sequel. I'm well aware of the criticism that it got, and I do think some of it is justified, but some of it, I think fans burdened the movie with their own sets of expectations, and when those theories didn't pan out, there was disappointment in what we actually got. Almost reminds me of the disappointment with WandaVision over the lack of Mephisto. But again, I liked the movie, and more pertinent to this review, I loved Wong. It's funny, but for all the issues everyone has had with Phase 4, one of the common positives has been Wong. He's been popping in and out with post-credit appearances in Shang-Chi, as well as showing up in No Way Home, and even She-Hulk, where he had one of the funniest moments so far. I think what's becoming clear is that he is becoming more of an integral character in the MCU, and it's a shame we haven't gotten a licensed version of him yet. I think it's a missed opportunity from Hot Toys, but then again, we did say the same thing about characters like Nebula, and she sat around for a while with some major discounts, so maybe Hot Toys knows something we don't about the demand for the character. However, as I've said often on the channel, third party is there to at least help fill these gaps. So in steps Toys Battalion, or Toys Era, and gives us the first Wong on the market. So with that intro out of the way, let's take a look at the figure and the full package we're getting. And it's not as fully loaded as other releases, but also not fully bare bones. He includes a display stand that does have a very Doctor Strange appropriate print on the base, some alternate hands, a magical shield effect, and two magical swords on, and the sling ring. So decent package overall. So let's take a closer look, and we'll start with the shield effect. And it's nicely done with the glyph markings etched on the surface and a nice amber color that's translucent plastic that has some color gradient to try to give you that magical effect. On the rear, the connection points to the hand are very similar to what we've seen with the Doctor Strange figures from Hot Toys, with the flame-like effects for the fingers to slide into. Unlike those Hot Toys releases though, the plastic here isn't as translucent, so it just doesn't look as good. But for the most part, it'll be hidden away, so not a big issue. Next up, his swords, and they're both identical, albeit there is a bit of a rough finish to one of them where the mold seems to have left some excess plastic. Again, not a deal breaker, but it is a third-party release, so not surprising that we're getting some of these minor QA/QC issues here. Other than that, these are serviceable with some nice braid-like details for the handle that do give the piece a little more, oomph. What I wish were a little different is the color choice for the plastic. It's much more orange than the shield, so there's a clear difference between both, and I just think it could have benefited from being more similar. Now in the movies there are color differences, but this just doesn't match as well. Next you get his sling ring, which is small enough that no one will really notice the detail work, and it's serviceable, although not as well done as the releases we've gotten with the Doctor Strange figures. Finally, he comes with a slew of alternate hands, and they're all okay. I think some of them have a glossier finish than others, making it look a little plastic, and there's good detail work here though, but it feels kind of all over the place. And one hand even has a sloppy finish on the thumb, so it looks a little injured or deformed. Granted, this is me looking really close at these, so I'm trying to pick everything apart. And look, on these reviews, I'm going to tell you the good and the bad, at least as I see it, whether it's issues with the piece itself, breakage, and here, this was my first issue with this figure. My package, which was fully sealed, was delivered with a hand missing. I can see the spot on the tray for it, and it just looks like they forgot to include it, so it's annoying. I just got the figure, so I'll reach out to see if I can get the hand shipped my way. Is it a deal breaker? Not really. I'm not going to use every hand all the time, but it sucks to have an incomplete set. So that's it as far as accessories. Now let's jump into the crux of this, and that's the sculpt. It's not the best sculpt, and it's not the worst one. I'll say it's almost decent. There's something not totally there. Maybe it's the eyes, but it definitely looks like Wong. I think the biggest issue is some of the paintwork, particularly around the facial hair, where it's a little soft and lacks some details, and also with some paint bleeding around his actual hair. And it's kind of a shame when you consider the rest of the paintwork on the face itself and the detailing. Wong has some spots on his cheeks that are really well recreated here, so that's a huge plus, and it's something really nice with the sculpt. I just wish I could tell you I was blown away by it. It's serviceable for a third party, but not on par with what we see with the big shots on the market, unfortunately. As far as his clothing, this is a bit of a highlight, as there's some real nice detailing here. Some of the elements seem to be more rubbery, so as far as longevity goes, I think that it should last a little bit longer. The belt in particular is really nice with some screen printed white dragons that do look great, and at the interior of his cloak, they used a really great pattern material. Only shame here is that the clothes aren't wired, so you can't pose the clothing in a dynamic setup, and unfortunately as a result, some of the nice detailing for the interior part of the garment gets lost. Shoes are okay too. They're simple and have some weathering, dirt, and grime. Nothing super complex here. On the sides of his belt, he does include some drop-down fabric that has some really good detailing with a textured, almost knitted fabric element over a series of smaller panels that are stitched together. So really nice highlight. As well. So overall, from an outfit stance, looks really good. Sleeves look okay, with the biggest highlight being some kind of gauntlet he has on the left arm. And while it's distinctive, the detailing isn't the best, with a lot of paint bleed along the edges of what's supposed to be a purple fabric that wraps around the metal parts. So, okay, not super terrible, but not great either. So overall thoughts on the figure as we keep on looking at some poses. He's a solid addition to the MCU collection, and as a background figure, he'll blend in really nicely with the Doctor Strange line and the rest of the MCU figures. And I'm sure that that'll still be the case when the Wanda eventually gets released from the movie. He does lack some of the detail we get with Hot Toys, but he looks good enough, especially for a third-party release. Fingers crossed at some point Hot Toys gives us a version of the character, but if they don't, I think this version is a fairly solid recreation of the character. As far as posability goes, he is remarkably fun to pose with the double jointed elbows, so he can attain some dynamic looks and also look pretty natural, which is a good thing because when I opened up the box and took him out, it was a little jarring at first because he just looked very awkward. But if you take your time with him, you can definitely get the clothes to drape a little bit better, and you can get the body situated just in a more natural way. I will say mine is a little stiff with some of the joints, so I had to take my time bending and twisting as well, and at times I did have to stop myself because I felt like there was a chance of a break, but fortunately I was able to loosen them just enough to get some good poses. Also, the hands we do get, for the most part, fit well on the pegs, but two of them have undersized peg holes, so I had to take an X-Acto knife and just gently peel away some layers to make the opening a little bigger. I'm sure you could have also done this with warm water to loosen the joint and make it a little more flexible, but I really dislike doing that, so this was my slight mod to make the hand swap easier. So those were just some of the basic issues. So again, I'm happy to have him, but he isn't a figure that's necessarily going to blow anyone away. He's not, in his current configuration, a showstopper, like the Doctor Strange figure, for example. But for me, wanting a Wong, it was a great option, and unfortunately at this point in time, he's the only option on the market. And he does look good, and at least he blends in well with the other figures. Sometimes I think the question for us as collectors has to become, in this age where the norm is kind of closing in on $300 figures, if a secondary character like Wong is worth it. Personally, I think Wong, like Okoye for example, would be. But for some other characters, the lower price point that comes with third parties might be worth it. And look, within our jumping into the game on the market as well, I think we have to realize that those companies charging anywhere from $300 to $500 for a figure won't be able to do a figure like this that's going to appeal to a much smaller consumer base. At least I don't think they will. I think they're going to gravitate towards the big name characters as a whole. So I'm happy that there are these companies that can step in and allow us to add characters like Wong into the collection. At least until or if Hot Toys moves forward with a version of the character. I think he does the job, and you get some really nice poses with him, so he's not just a statue figure that's going to stand in a museum pose. There are lots of possibilities here if you're interested and if you take your time. So that was a relatively quick look at the Sorcerer Supreme from Toys Battalion, and like I said, not a bad release for a third-party figure. He's not likely to make my top releases of 2023, but he's a solid figure overall, just not an overall exciting release. So, let me know your thoughts, and I'm curious what you do think about these secondary characters and the feasibility and viability of big name companies, that need to move a lot of volume actually jumping in and doing a figure like this. Now, thanks for watching, and if you are enjoying the review and some of the other First Thoughts breaking news videos, please go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll touch base on the next one.